Thank you very much, Aaron. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Reardon. I'm the chairman of the Harbor Development Committee. Welcome to our specialized meeting for purposes of principally discussing the long-awaited Whitney Wharf Bridge. We're glad to be able to, through the auspices of HCAM, carry this on tape and live, so that some folks at home may be able to pick up this discussion as well. Just to give you a sense of where we're headed over the next hour or two, we have a meeting whose principal focus is the choice, discussion and choice of finishes for the Whitney Wharf Bridge project. We do have some governance matters that we'll cover first, and I thought it made sense, since we have the town's attention, perhaps by TV, to talk a little bit about 4 warrant articles that have been discussed over the last several months, just to give some of the folks at home a sense of what else is happening on the harbor. So that's what we'll accomplish this evening, and we'll be going pursuant to an agenda that was sent out to the committee earlier this week. So just to get started, we do have some minutes from a prior meeting. This is a meeting of February 17th. Ed Morris to my left prepared them. No, actually, Paul Asordo to my right prepared them. And I would entertain, if you've had a chance to look at them, Tom, and I have, Paul, I know you have, I'd entertain a motion for approval of those minutes.
I'll make a motion that the minutes of February 17th be approved by the board.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. As I said, quick governance. We'll try not to bog you down in that. At this point, I'm going to step over to a chart of the harbor so that I can walk. Those in the room pretty much know most of this, but I'll give you a flavor for it, but it's more for the folks at home. So I'm going to switch microphones. So as I mentioned, there are actually 4 waterfront articles that will be in this year's town meeting. They've been the subject of lengthy discussions at both this committee, other committees of the town planning board, the selectmen, and the advisory committee. And I think it might be worthwhile, since we have the town's attention, to just walk through those, very briefly. The first, which this committee and the Bathing Beach Trustees Committee, chaired by Alan Peralt and also joined by Ed Johnson, co-sponsored an article to town meeting that will address 2 things. First, the problem of the bathing beach and the sand migration that has occurred at the bathing beach. This warrant article, labeled currently DD, it will ultimately have a number in the town warrant, asks for 2 things. First, $652,000 to address the sand problem when we've had northwest storms washing down the beach in the fall and winter. We had it again this winter. Those of you who might have seen, before we had our snow farm down there, the beach was pretty badly eroded in the October-November timeframe. The plan is to use that money to do 2 things. One, cut the edge of the parking lot back some 25 to 30 feet, not losing any parking spaces because it's a very wide area, that first parking row, and then below, at or slightly above, but mostly below the level of the parking lot, an interlocking concrete wall set on a gravel base, with the sand then coming up to it. The result will be a more gentle incline of the sand on the beach, which should minimize the amount of wash that we've been getting of the sand moving from the bathing beach down onto particularly the boat ramp area. That's part one, $652,000. The second portion relates to a longer-term effort yes, Tom?
Yeah, the only context, Bill, how long from the studies and the gentleman on the bathing beach, how long have you been working on all this to come up with those numbers, that's all? It's been a long time.
Yeah, as I as I said, subject of lots of meetings over, for this issue, the bathing beach issue, several years.
The engineering alone, Tom, was funded 2 years ago by town meeting, so it's been kind of 2 years in the making. And actually, it's a combination of Polaris and Beals and Thomas, who's here. So this has been talked about for a while.
Right.
And the armor stone that we actually did this fall, late fall into winter, was the first part. It's actually connected to all this.
Let me explain that,
Yes.
for those at home. Alan is referring to the first project of a series that the town, particularly the Harbor Development Committee and the Bathing Beach trustees, have been working on. The first component was restoration and really an entire rebuild of what has been referred to as the armor stone in front of the Grove portion of the bathing beach. That's in front of the bathhouse. Those, again, who may have seen this just around Christmas time when the work was done, there is quite a significant new and very heavy-duty stone wall. It's higher. It also has a bit of a wrap right here, so that there is less damaging from those northwest winds and waves, in the fall. So that was the first step. This is the second step. It enables our work, which we're trying to do on the boat ramp. The state has told us they would be willing to help us and fund a replacement of our existing boat ramp and the parking lot, funding permitting. But in order to do that, we have to first address the sand issue, hence the work on the bathing beach. The second component of this article, DD, is $175,000 for engineering on the 4 town-owned wharfs, and I'll just point those out on the chart so you can have a sense of this. Some people who are not familiar with the harbor, sometimes when we talk about these names, it doesn't mean much to them. The 4 wharves that the town owns are so-called Iron Horse Park. That's the horse with the statue on top. Whitney Wharf was rebuilt already, so we have not addressed that. Then there is a parcel called the POW-MIA Park and the former mobile station. That's in this area right here. So that's the second. And then the third and fourth are referred to as Barnes 1 and Barnes 2. Barnes 1 is the wharf that Lincoln Maritime currently operates its rowing and sailing program. Barnes 2 is the currently natural wharf. Barnes 1 is there, Barnes 2 is there. The thrust of this effort, the re-engineering here, is to address what are deteriorating conditions on all 4 of these wharfs. To a greater or lesser extent, it depends on the wharf. Probably the worst condition is Barnes 2, but the mobile station is in very, very dire shape as well. We learned from our legislators at a meeting in the fall that they very much look to towns to have done the advance work, primed the pump a little bit with engineering, so that when and if funds become available either through the Seaport Bond Council or Representative Bradley has had press indicating that there's a bond bill of some multi-millions, some of which would be directed toward Hingham. It is dependent on funding, but the point is we do need to be opportunistic. If we have this engineering work done that says what needs to be done to repair these walls and or to address the issue of sea level rise, and some townspeople may be aware there's a sea level rise study that is being completed now. It will be rolled out and reported on in April prior to town meeting. So all of this comes together nicely in terms of addressing these wharves, which may need to also be raised slightly to address sea level rise, and dependent on the study that we get coming out in April. So that's the first article. A long-winded discussion, but I think worth it for the town to understand what the 2 pieces of that article are. The second is a citizen petition started with a group of concerned Summer Street residents who have worried for a very long time about dangers connected with the Summer Street corridor. the number of accidents, including several fatal accidents that have occurred over time there, the difficulty of traffic flowing down from Summer Street, right here, to the Rotary. This is, I think, the second most dangerous place for traffic accidents in Hingham. A lot of accidents at the Rotary. The state has been aware of this for a long time, but simply state and the town have not necessarily prioritized. Derby Street was deemed to be the first priority. That engineering is largely done, and there is work progressing. We're at the very early stages here of addressing what it is that needs to be done in the Summer Street / Rotary 3A corridor, all the way from the Rotary, carrying right through downtown and over to the Lobster Pound by Crow Point. This article requests $400,000 for engineering work, preliminary engineering work to be done, probably over a 2 to 3 year time frame, to begin to flesh out what might be some long-term solutions to address this very key issue for the town. As far as the Harbor Development Committee, it absolutely ties into the work we're doing, because the question of access to the harbor, the crosswalks right in front of the Liberty Grill or in front of Stars, how all of that would relate, that's what this article is all about. I failed to mention that in the case of the first article where we stand, this is the article on the engineering in the bathing beach, Selectmen unanimously approved. The advisory committee last week also approved that article. Funding to come from accumulated mooring permit fees that are in the general fund. This second article, the engineering for Summer Street and the Rotary, also to be funded from the general fund. You'll see that there's a theme here and a lot of demands on the general fund. That too, as I said, was approved unanimously by the selectmen, and I think it was unanimous at the advisory committee as well, certainly a large majority. The third article is one that has been a discussion for some time in town, and that relates to Barnes 1, which is currently the home of Lincoln Maritime, a rowing and sailing program that's been there for some 30 years. Their current lease is, I think, a 3-year lease, and it expires in August of 2015. The town committed, the last time the lease was renewed, to addressing a longer-term lease for whatever proponents would be on Barnes Wharf, because in order to build more substantial facilities, the current lessee would have to have a lease term of quite substantially longer life. That article was the subject of a request for proposal put out in December, and the existing Lincoln Maritime facility has submitted a proposal that's being evaluated currently. But this article is simply addressing the question, should the town allow up to a 30-year lease term for the lease of Barnes 1. That article was, I believe, by a majority passed with the selectmen, and I was there for the advisory committee vote, and I know their vote was 10 for and 4 against. So there will be some continuing discussion about that article, I'm sure. The final article, which I want to give you a sense of, is very, very new, very recent, and in some ways problematic, in the sense that it's going to cause this committee, the Bathing Beach Committee, and the whole town to engage in a conversation about relative merits of various things along the harbor. This involves a negotiated purchase of what is currently a marina at 26 Summer Street. I'll show you that on the map. It's that facility there, currently run by John Kenny and Dana Baxter as a marina. It's privately owned. The town has entered into a discussion and has a tentative agreement to purchase that parcel for the town for $2.9 million. the town would continue to have the current tenants run their marina, and the revenues from that would flow into, reducing the purchase price. This was only negotiated in the last 2 weeks. The advisory committee has had an initial conversation. The selectmen had an initial conversation and tentatively were for going forward with this purchase, but they fully recognize that the purchase price is significant, and the town is going to have to think through, is this a priority? Is it a priority in relation to these other articles that have dollar amounts that I've described? That's going to be the discussion. I can tell you that the advisory committee is expecting to have a public hearing on the matter. They did not vote. They heard about it, but they did not vote on March 26th, and I think their vote on the subject, which will be in the supplement to the warrant, it will not be in the original warrant, is scheduled for April 15th, as I recall. Remember, the town meeting is April 27th or 28th. So there'll be more to come on that. One of the things that has to happen is that the town needs to get an appraisal. The purchase price was tentatively negotiated based on an appraisal by the seller, and obviously the town wants to have its own appraisal before making any decision on that. So I just thought it did make sense to give you a flavor for that. One other quick sidelight, and it's a positive one for those who love the harbor. I happen to sit in on the town budget for the harbor master, and the harbor master's budget was increased, and this was recommended by the advisory committee and the selectmen, to allow the administrative person in the harbor master's office to increase her hours from 19 to 26. So she would basically be there the better part of 4 days a week rather than the current 3. So I think that's good news for all boaters who need to be in touch with Ken Corson or with his office. I happened to be in for some permits today, and it was great to have her there. So with that, I'm going to go back to the table, and we're going to get into the meat of our conversation tonight, which is about the Whitney Wharf Bridge. So, Eric, is that table far enough away, the chart far enough away from your screen? Why don't you take your lens cap off and let's give that a try. Ed, or Alan, could you just pull that a little bit further? I think we're all right on the lights. Those at home are getting this in a direct feed from the computer. So if those in the audience can see, then I think we're good. Let me at this point introduce Eric Loss. Eric is a engineer with Beals and Thomas, which is the consulting firm that the Harbor Development Committee has been working on regarding the Whitney Wharf article since we approved this concept for the harbor. Just a very brief summary, because Eric has got a little bit of history that he's going to walk us through. This has been the subject of something in front of the town and harbor lovers for, it goes all the way back to 2004, I think. But we finally approved a location and a basic concept for this bridge at the 2012 annual meeting. And appropriated $275,000 of Community Preservation Committee funds to build this bridge, design it, permit it, and build it. Last year, at the 2014 annual town meeting, we had to revisit because we knew with the passage of time that costs had increased. So we did request, and Community Preservation Committee again recommended, and the town again accepted and voted to add $40,000 to that amount. So it is that we have been working on since last year's town meeting. Some of you may have seen the article that I crafted for the Hingham Journal, where I tried to sort of tell the story. Many people have asked, where is the bridge? What's happening here? And I can only assure you that this person, who happens to be the liaison responsible for it, has been pushing our engineers very hard. But the permitting process for anything on the harbor is difficult, and Eric's presentation will make that clear. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Loss, and he's going to walk us through his presentation. We're going to, it will address the history, the status, the timetable of where we're going, and the key decisions that he needs from this committee tonight regarding going forward with bidding documents. Those are things like color and finishes of the bridge, the deck treatment, the detail on railings and their appearance, and finally lighting issues. All of this will feed into bidding documents, which we hope to put out as soon as we get our last permit. Eric is also joined this evening by Mark Mazzarelli. Mark is a sub-consultant to Eric and his firm on some of the aesthetic characteristics of this bridge, and has been working with Eric on some of the suggestions that we're going to review tonight. Our format will be to go through Eric's presentation first, let him finish it, then have questions and commentary from members of the Harbor Development Committee, and then to the extent that there are members of the public who have questions, we'll engage those. And only after that will we go into deliberating and actually trying to come back to Eric with some decisions. So, long introduction. Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate the introduction. I'd like to take about 15 minutes to go through the slides. This is an adaptation of a presentation that I gave to the committee several weeks ago with the status, have new information as well as additional details regarding the aesthetic finishes that Bill mentioned. At the end, we'll be able to back up, take a closer look at several slides that provide representative photos of different options, and we can get into more detail at that time. Just to recap, when we came into this project, understanding the objectives, the vision of the bridge was established through the development of the Hingham Harbor Master Plan, and the goal here is really to create a safe, aesthetically pleasing passage for pedestrians along the waterfront, integrating the properties that Bill had discussed earlier, and really promoting the use and enjoyment of the harborfront. Obviously trying to do this all in a very expedited and efficient manner to get through the design, permitting, and construction of the bridge. In terms of the location, we have Whitney Wharf. You can see here on the right side, the eastern side, Route 3A. We're just west of the Rotary. This is the Red Eye Roasters location here, 3 Otis Street. And the proposed location, the context, the aerial here is indicated by this yellow crossing here. Now the bridge at this location would alleviate the need to use the existing sidewalk along 3A, which is very loud, noisy, and has a general unsafe feel to it when using it, given the speed and extent of traffic that travel on Route 3A. So by having the bridge located away from that, over the water, closer to the harbor, be much more aesthetically pleasing, and will link Whitney Wharf with the town pier property here. This is a closer view of the layout that we developed through the design and preliminary design and permitting process. Just for context, north is up, consistent with the aerial photograph that you just saw. Whitney Wharf is on the right side. This Bear Cove Properties, this is where Red Eye Roasters is located. The town spent a considerable amount of time working with the property owner there to secure a public access easement that would allow the public to traverse the property here. and get from Whitney Wharf to the town-owned property on the western side. Since Whitney Wharf has been relatively recently reconstructed, it's in very good shape. The approach on this side would be essentially a flush approach to the pedestrian bridge at the same grade that's there presently. The railing in that location would be removed in one section to allow access onto the pedestrian bridge. We have about 83 feet span over the water. And we come into a much larger approach on the western side and landing that'll essentially be a timber deck that works with the space that's there with the grade that is in that location. And then transitions down to the existing grade, the parking area that's here behind Red Eye Roasters. There would also be a handicap ramp. One of the main goals is to ensure that this project is built to be ADA compliant, fully accessible to disabled and handicapped residents and citizens. This plan in front of you is essentially the plan that was reviewed by various local, state, and federal permitting agencies as we went through the permitting process. This is a schematic profile, again, just a representation of the bridge to scale. Again, we have, it's going to be a pile-supported structure, timber piles, that'll be spaced approximately 10 feet apart. There is going to be a free span section in the middle, approximately 20 to 21 feet. That will allow the passage of any vessels up to the Mill Pond outfall along 3A. That isn't an area that really is used by boat traffic at all, but by having that free span there, it does allow access to that area if need be in the future. The railing style here, again, it's just a representation. We'll get into that further in the presentation. But essentially shows what it would be looking at if you were looking at this from the water, from the harbor. This is what the bridge would look like in a profile view. This plan here is from the master plan. This was developed by Mark Mazzarelli. And even though this was created some time ago, this vision has been carried through, and our current design and permitting plans, very closely resemble this vision that was established when the harbor master plan was developed. In terms of project status, the preliminary design plan I showed, is 100% complete at this point. In terms of the permitting, there were a number of local, state, federal permits that were required from Hingham Conservation Commission, Hingham Planning Board, Mass DEP, Mass Historic Commission, and the U.S. Coast Guard. We're nearly complete with all of those. The only outstanding permit is Chapter 91 waterways license for the bridge itself, that structure. And we are anticipating that Mass DEP will be issuing that license in the next couple of weeks. That will be the last permit that is needed for this project. And in terms of the construction documents, which goes with the bidding documents, we're starting that process now, which is good timing with this meeting this evening so that we can get feedback from the committee, from the public that is here, that will guide us through the development of those construction documents. In terms of the project schedule, Bill had alluded to this earlier. We're looking to put this project out in an RFP, solicit bids this spring, hopefully by in April, and get those proposals back and look through those in May, develop a contract, the funding appropriated to begin, and then starting starting construction early summer, and wrapping this up hopefully mid to late summer would be the target schedule at this point. In terms of the design considerations that are still outstanding, at this point, we really have, aesthetic considerations, and, we've retained Mark Mazzarelli. His involvement in the development of the master plan, was a key piece of that vision, and so we're relying on his experience through that process to provide additional comments and feedback and guidance to the committee regarding, as Bill had noted, the color, any coloration, surface treatments, railing style, and lighting options, and I'm going to go through those next. And just want to preface this by saying that all options are really on the table still at this point. We provided pictures just to facilitate discussion, get people thinking of different options that are available. They're not nothing set in stone at this point, so we're really trying to just get the feedback in terms of where we want to go with some of these details, and we can make sure that the RFP includes criteria that will prioritize these 4 relative items to each other, so we understand which ones are most important, again, on a relative basis. And essentially what we're going to have to do, as we have done throughout this process, is there is a set budget that was awarded by the CPC, and what we have to do essentially is back our design in to fit that budget, and we've been proceeding with that mindset, and the selection of these final finishes and details here will also be dependent upon how the funding and the proposals that come in line up. It'll guide how these are ultimately selected in the end. Just starting with bridge color, again, people may have preconceived notions of what they would want, but the reality is that there are a lot of options in this regard. There's obviously a natural timber color. I was a professional engineer, and Beals and Thomas was involved in the design and permitting of the timber bridge at World's End Reservation, the trustees' property off of Martin's Lane. And that bridge, that timber bridge, is a natural southern yellow pine, just again to give a representative example reference point. However, there are options to go with a wood stain that would have a darker tint to the natural timber color. There's also other sorts of coatings, paints that could be added based upon preference. Again, just a representative example here. You have a timber pine bridge, the simple UV sealant on it, but essentially the coloration is the natural color of that particular species of pine. Here are some views of different color options. There's stain options on the left to have a darker hue. And on the right, there's actually more of a tint where it's a tinted paint coating. There's actually a light blue on the railings and kind of an artificial brown coating over the natural wood. Again, just trying to see what the options are available and guide that thought process. In terms of the surface treatment overall, and what we mean by overall is, the railings, structural supports, and the deck itself. One option is to not have any sort of treatment of the natural wood. We've indicated in our presentation here that is not recommended. We're in a marine environment. The winters we have and the summers that we have, pretty harsh on timber. This isn't going to be chemically treated timber. So the non-treatment option, we would not recommend it. It is an option, but the preferred option, in our opinion, would be a simple UV-resistant sealant. Protects the timber, lengthens the bridge lifespan. Very minimal maintenance required, reapplication every 10 years or so. It doesn't change the coloration of the timber too much. And one of the criteria of the RFP will likely be that there is a warranty on the bridge by the contractor. And it may be that a UV-resistant sealant is required for that contractor to be able to place a warranty on the completed bridge.
Is that used at World's End?
It was, yes.
UV.
Correct.
Thank you.
Again, just representative, just natural wood would not really hold up in this situation for very long, untreated. UV-resistant sealants, they can be colored. They can also be very lightly tinted. There is a slight coloration to even the lightest version of that, but you can try to keep it as natural looking as possible as well. Now, in terms of the surface treatment on the decking, there are a couple options to consider. If there's the UV sealant only, as in the case at the World's End Bridge, neither option 1 or 2 here are on that decking surface. The trustees elected to not perform that, so it is the natural timber with just the sealant on it. But there is a textured polymer coating that could be placed on the decking portion of the bridge here, so it wouldn't necessarily be visible if you were looking from 3A or from the water. It would only be visible really if you were on the bridge or in the vicinity of it. But the benefits of having a textured polymer coating is reduces slip hazards, a little bit better traction. There is some maintenance in terms of reapplication, but relatively minor. Item number 2 is a much more aggressive option, probably not applicable in this case. Just wanted to make the committee aware. It's an epoxy and stone aggregate. It's typically used on vehicular bridges, not really for pedestrian type bridges. And again, similar maintenance considerations. There would be reapplication. When we have snowy winters, snow removal efforts. When you have timber, there's inherently potential for some damage to occur in terms of snow removal. So having these coatings, the more snow removal that occurs, the greater the likelihood that reapplication would be needed. Here are some representative photos of the item number 1, the textured polymer coating, which is typically used on pedestrian bridges. There is some coarseness to it. It's not overly aggressive. Comes in various colors. And then here is the epoxy stone aggregate. It actually, from a distance, almost looks like asphalt, generally speaking. So, again, it is often used on vehicular rated timber bridges as a surface. Now, in terms of railing style, again, there's quite a few more options in this regard, and each of these broader categories have almost an unlimited variety within each of them that is possible. Ultimately, the railing style will be in part dictated by the Massachusetts State Building Code, which requires that vertical railings be no greater than 4 inches apart You know, you think about children sticking their head or hands through, you know, the railings, portions of the railing. They want that spacing to be narrow enough that there isn't any issue. The World's End Bridge actually incorporated a wire mesh, a steel wire mesh, with a very tight grid pattern on it, because that's a vehicular bridge, and the railing style there was essentially developed to withstand a vehicular impact. That's why that railing is as bulky and is designed the way it is. I have a couple photos of it coming up here, but it was really because that vehicular impact consideration in that case. But where the railings were much further apart, the wire mesh was used to keep that 4-inch maximum spacing and make it conform to the building code. When you're looking at it from a distance, however, you can't really tell that the mesh is there. So there's a horizontal with wire mesh. I'll explain, you know, further again the reason why that's not recommended in the following photos. There's a timber picket style, which was actually essentially what was shown on the profile view, the schematic profile view I showed earlier. There's also ornamental metal picket where you'd have actual steel vertical supports. Get very intricate in the design of that. Essentially a cost premium associated with the ornamental metal. And then there's a truss style, which essentially, you know, is if you think of old railroad bridges where you have, you know, certain members at 45 degrees and angles. I'll provide photos of those. So those are the broad categories of railings that there are to pick from. So this is a horizontal style. This is actually the railing at the World's End Bridge. As you can tell, you know, the members, the vertical supports and horizontal supports are quite large here, much larger than you typically would have on a purely pedestrian bridge. And there's really no picket style spacing of vertical pieces here. And again, this was primarily because of the impact rating on this dictated this design. The big disadvantage of this, particularly for Whitney Wharf, is that the horizontal members, it would potentially allow for children to have a way to climb up, and that's really not what you want to be promoting. So we're not recommending this style for the Whitney Wharf Bridge because of that reason. We're trying to stay away from horizontal railings that children could potentially climb. Correct. To the extent that you can avoid it. So here's the picket style that I referred to earlier. This is probably the most common overall style of railing for timber pedestrian bridges. The configuration and spacing here, because if you're utilizing steel mesh, you can increase the spacing between the vertical supports to really any distance. Obviously, the more vertical supports there are, the greater the cost. So that is a consideration as well. Here's the ornamental metal picket style. Very similar, except that the vertical portions of this, are steel, and they can be shaped, curved, really to taste, any taste.
As far as Anderson Park and
offhand, Bill, I can't confirm that. Again, it's a very nice style. There is a cost premium associated with it. I don't have specific details on the relative difference. Everything is dependent on the style, the number of vertical railings that there are between styles. That really dictates the price as well. So it's hard to just give an overall kind of estimate on railings at this point. Here's the truss style. A lot of different options here. It's just, again, slightly different variation on the on all of them, really. But again, another option that is available. The last category is with regard to lighting. Again, everything is still on the table at this point. We're trying to just facilitate further discussion. Things that we're going to, be considering are the actual fixtures, the style of the fixtures, that whether they're on vertical poles that are up on the deck surface. There's the pole height as a consideration, even the style of the pole. There are sconces that are another option to provide lighting at a lower level, closer to the bridge deck. There's options to integrate the poles with the timber railing as well, and the location of those lighting fixtures. All of that is still at play at this point, and we're looking to get feedback, on each of these items. There's some concepts here that Mark Mazzarelli had prepared, again, to essentially lay out where fixtures could be located. This is the process that we go through. We try to hone in on where the fixtures will be, the height and location. We're all going to dictate the level of intensity of the light. So all those factors are going to come together in developing a final lighting plan.
May I ask a question?
Good. I think we'll finish, and then we'll go into questions. The committee first, and then the public.
Yep, I'm just about done. I only have a couple more slides. Really, what we have in the next few slides are just a variety of different styles, just so that everyone can see options that are out there. Mark can certainly speak to these further. If there are any questions about any of them, we can come back and revisit all these slides as well. So a lot of different options. Once you select a certain pole height, pole style, then the fixtures themselves, there's a wide variety of options for each of those as well.
This is the town standard light.
This light fixture here is the town of Hingham's standard fixture. This is the fixture that's on Whitney Wharf currently. Additional schematics that will be developed. This will help guide the RFP. Once we get the feedback this evening, Mark will prepare additional schematics to come up with a preferred concept, and that'll be incorporated into the RFP for the project. Again, just different options, so you can see different railing configurations and lighting, and all of those elements tie together really to dictate the overall aesthetics of the bridge upon completion.
All right. Eric, thank you. So as I suggested, I think we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. First, I need to mention to both the committee and to any members of the public who want to be heard that you have to be within about 1.5 feet of these microphones for your comment to be picked up by the TV. And we want to have the folks at home know that. So Eric, what I'm probably going to have you do is put that one up and over here, and if you need to speak again, we can use one of the other mics here on the table. I think the way this makes the most sense would be to go through each of the 4 things that we are considering and discussing, hear questions from the committee on that component, ask for questions from the public on that component, and then move on to the next of the 4. So if we do that, we would start with color, and the question, I think, really was if you're back to a wooden structure, which is what we're contemplating here, the degree to which you choose to either treat that just from weather, as we would a deck stain or a table stain at home, or actually treat it with something that adds color to the natural wood, which gets you into some maintenance issues as well. I chose today to go down to World's End and to walk the World's End Bridge just to remind myself of what it looked like and the way it was constructed on several of these topics. And I think Eric confirmed that it is simply natural. Is it pressure treated Southern Pine or not? No. It's not. Okay. But it is UV protected, and that's been in place, I want to say, 3 years, 4 years, and is holding up, very well. It is very heavy-duty construction, obviously, because they're carrying large. So, committee, and included in this, Alan and Ed, you were part of the joint meetings when we were doing all this, and Alan, you were specifically, on the Harbor Development Committee when we proposed this. Questions, thoughts?
I have a couple. One quick question is it possibly use composite decking for this type of application?
It would be possible.
Eric, so pull that mic over toward you, and Tom, if we need to, you and I can share, and they can share. Go ahead, Eric.
The pricing, in terms of the initial funding request, did not consider the use of that material, and in my opinion, the cost premium would not be possible to incorporate that here, and still be able to have lighting and railing
I was thinking from a
options.
Point of view. I happened to get an email from Chris Daly, one of our former Harbor Development Committee meeting representatives, and actually got a liaison with advisory when this was being funded, and he said, as low maintenance as possible was his recommendation in terms of, and we know the issues of trying to maintain everything we have now. So,
Bill, may I? Thank you. Eric, thank you for the presentation. Even though we've been following this for quite a while, I learned an awful lot today. I think partly because your plans are a little more refined and partly because we know we have to make some decisions. I think the first fundamental decision is color, is brown versus gray. A lot of the plans, the bridges that you showed were a darker brown color. I think looking in the background, you'd see that they're on a golf course or in a southern environment or inland, freshwater. I think in a nautical environment, I think something towards the gray, toward the more natural. And looking closely and thinking about what you told us about the World's End Bridge and what Bill has told us, I believe that's a little too natural because it was built for a different purpose. We'll get into, so I think gray, I do believe gray, something a little more nautical in the gray. And I won't get ahead of myself, but if you could go back to the other picture, the picture, just that picture with really, I'm not saying people need a place to put their coffee cups, and I know Chairman Reardon has told us we're going to get into railings later, but I believe that in a gray, and I share Alan Peralt's comment on could the deck been composite, but that's another issue that Chairman Reardon will allow us to speak about separately. But I believe something like that in a gray, in a nautical gray, in something robust enough to withstand the weather and the wear and tear that in the aging process, but nautical enough and subtle enough that it doesn't look like it belongs on an inland golf course or a lagoon. It belongs in a nautical environment. That's all I have to say.
Other questions or thoughts on this one?
Yeah, could you answer?
Could we have him answer that issue first about the different coloring and gray coloring and what the cost effect, if any, is?
There are a wide variety of colorations. It's all going to be dependent upon the contractor that's selected. What we're trying to come up with here is criteria to include in the RFP that will guide the decision-making process in selecting a preferred contractor for this project. So these details, will be incorporated there as criteria that will be used to judge the proposals that come in and as part of the RFP process. So we can dictate certain colors, but we have to make sure that that those are actually available. So I know that there is a lot of variety available for coloration, but ultimately it will depend on the contractor that's selected in terms of what they offer.
Light gray stain, almost, it sometimes wood goes that way. It simply becomes gray. I have a deck of my own that started out as pressure treated, and it just gradually just becomes it's weathered. It has less brown to it and more gray to it. But I pick up your point in terms of others. Tom.
So the World's End, I've seen the World's End, which I like in concept. Do you have other examples around the town or nearby towns that we could look at that shows the natural or the stained, or just real examples from a physical?
I do not offhand. I don't have those this evening. What I have seen, has generally been consistent with the World's End, where it's essentially more of a natural timber that's allowed to, weather and tends to turn that grayish color over time. And that's what I've personally seen looking at other sites. Working with the trustees when we were, doing the visioning for that project. Other boardwalk projects we've done.
Secondly, how long is the expectation, like the ones at World End? How long are they supposed to, before they need to be replaced? Wood, or we're talking?
Yeah, it's over 20 years.
Okay.
Minimum. That's generally the starting point. And there are timber bridges that are 100 years old that are still in just fine shape now.
Covered in Vermont.
Right. Certainly vehicular, bridges that are used by vehicles, motorized vehicles of any sort, are going to deteriorate faster than pedestrian bridges. So there's inherently going to be less wear on this bridge than the World's End Bridge.
Just to marry the two questions, Eric, is UV, protection something that can be, incorporated with a very mild stain, so that you get a little bit of, graying down of the wood, and yet you're still basically worrying about the UV protection?
That would be the preferred way to achieve that slight tint of color, to provide a more weathered look, but still have that natural grain of the wood through it, and provide that UV protection and sealant to the whole bridge.
Thank you. That's helpful for me.
With various paint colors,
Just
with various different paint colors, do you have any knowledge if there's any sort of heat gain from the sun, or with the paints, is there any sort of protection against splinters, splintering of the wood, or as it ages, and the finish wears off, are you going to be more likely to get splinters? Because I'm thinking of little kids running across it barefoot or sitting down, and having it sort of hot to the touch or giving them splinters.
Sure. If we want to jump forward to the surface treatment, that's really the next, next category.
Can I just ask, because I do think it makes sense to kind of deal with these piece by piece, and I just want to ask if the public has any question, anyone in the audience have any question with respect to color solely? If not, then let's go on to surface treatment. I'm sorry, Jim, did you have a question?
Yes.
Up to the mic, please. I'm going to be the dictator here.
Member of the Community Preservation Committee. I just want to make sure I understand. You said you could have a natural color and use the sealant to protect it.
and then it'll weather, despite the sealant, it'll weather gradually degrade.
I mean,
Bill was talking about his
over
deck
a
weather.
longer period of time. But what we can do is by using a tinted sealant, we can have it look more weathered to start.
Most of us don't want to look any more weathered than we are, but, okay, I mean, basically, I just like the idea of the natural effect and becoming gray over time, but protecting it, certainly. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. So, yes.
I don't want to beat a dead horse in this one, but on the composite decking thing, I know it was probably something we had earlier. We're talking, what, this bridge is 8 feet wide?
12.
12 feet wide. 12 feet wide, and it's 80. So how many square feet of material are we talking?
It's 80-something feet long.
Yep.
So it's like 960 square feet, something like that? Less than 1,000 feet. Is the delta on that like a 2-to-1 thing, or what's your experience on like a composite versus that? Because I'm thinking you'd have a color and you'd never have to maintain it again, and I'm not worried about splinters. And I'm wondering, would it be at all possible to do it as an add alternate, just to find it out to see how much it would cost?
Certainly an option. In my opinion, the delta would be 3 to 4 times at least. World's End was use a southern yellow pine, and that material was actually brought up from Florida, to Hingham and put in, and it was done at a significant cost savings to the trustees to do it that way. Okay. Where you think about a composite material, and I've looked at it for my own deck, and it's a very steep premium. So I would think 3 to 4 times minimum. We can certainly consider it as an adult item. We would have to put it, probably at the end of the list, the way that those are selected.
Just a thought.
Alan's point is well taken. I have a cottage near the Sandwich Boardwalk, which is very close in pedestrian, non-vehicle use, and they did that au natural, kind of like a pedestrian version of World's End, and they did not treat it, at least the first time, and it rotted. Not the structural members, but the boards themselves, with people that had paid money for, and they all didn't rot evenly. One person's name might be obliterated in 3 years. So the treatment is well taken. But Alan and I are both indirectly in the construction business, and we know that there's 2 components to cost. One is materials, and the other is installation. I would say your installation costs are going to be pretty much the same for composite versus natural wood, and your maintenance costs are going to be a lot less. So putting it out as an ad alternate to see, which is great, because then you see if you can afford it or not when the numbers come in, might be an excellent way to treat that. And if you look as close as a project that Alan worked on, Ridgewood Crossing, you'll see a gray decking on the decks if the people let you behind their homes that is pretty natural looking. It's pretty impressive looking. Comes in a brown, they came in a brown and a gray. You guys chose gray, I believe. And that's pretty damn nautical looking, and I think it will hold up pretty well. Just to consider.
Yeah, certainly not adverse to the option. I'd just like to point out that there is also, in addition to the actual deck of the bridge itself, there's this wood patio deck on the western landing/approach, and that's going to probably double that. So you could have 2 different materials, but if you're trying to reduce maintenance costs on the bridge, well, you're still going to have maintenance costs on this portion of the deck, as well as the handicap ramp as well. So where if it was a timber, that consistent material could be carried through all elements, as opposed to having 2 different types. So just to consider that as well. So.
I think we'll wait until we get to the surface because
material.
that'll, I suspect, trigger another.
Some other conversation. Why don't we go on to that? So component 2 was surface treatment and decking. We sort of dealt with color and overall treatment, meaning UV versus not, and so forth. But decking, I think, was the other portion of surface treatment that you mentioned. So let's speak to that. Here, I had noted, you can go with this epoxy stone appearance or a polymer as opposed to wood, which was the primary, with no sort of surface treatment. I think about this as equivalent to these paints that you sometimes can get that have sand in them that you put down as a non-skid on a deck where you're concerned about that. I will mention that I went to, when I went to World's End today, I spoke to the guard at the gate, and he mentioned to me, he said, slippery is a problem on the World's End Bridge. I pointed out, and I think it's true, that part of that is that the World's End Bridge, because it handles vehicles, it had huge timbers, 4-inch thick timbers across, and then 2-inch boards that went the same direction as cars and trucks would go. So that it means when you're walking on it, you're walking with the grain. Whereas I expect that this bridge would probably be, if it were wood, it would be horizontal. So there'd be some grab as you hit each. Right. So it's not quite such a big thing, and less of an issue than the World's End situation. But let's get some reactions to the notion of one of these polymer treatments versus the natural wood.
I think, excuse me, Bill, I think the natural wood look is always preferred. But in thinking about the volume of people you'll have at such an active area with Red Eye Roasters and the harbor and people just taking casual strolls, I think the volume is going to be so substantial. And I also think, unlike a nice dock that you see a natural look, this is going to be used more year-round. I hadn't thought of that till tonight's presentation. I hadn't thought of snow and ice removal. So even though in these miserable winter we've had this winter, people might not be out strolling. In our normal 40-degree winter day that we often have, people would be out using this bridge. So they're going to be year-round use. Snow and ice removal is an issue. We know that means the timbers are going to get beat up. So my desire is probably shared by many in the committee to see a very natural look, preserved with whatever stain, needs to be, I think, upgraded to something that's robust enough, in the opinion of the professionals, to withstand the snow shovels, the general abuse that it may take by winter weather, winter traffic, snow shoveling. And I think that to the degree that you can keep some form of a natural look, I certainly don't like epoxy. It's closer to that, but I even find that picture on the left a little bit industrial looking. Maybe if it was in a gray it might look better, but to the degree that you can get us a non-slip, maybe it's too many things in one. Durable, wear good, non-stick surface, but not quite look so industrial. That would be what I would be looking for.
Let me just clarify, though, one thing. Eric, I thought you were raising with us the concern that if you use a polymer, it is more susceptible to being chipped up by shovels and dealing with snow, as opposed to the wood itself, which, because it doesn't have any coating on it, you're not worried about it peeling off. Is that? I just want to make sure
There's two considerations there. One, to go back to the earlier question about splintering and things, right? If you have this coating on it, you're not going to have snow removal on a natural wood unprotected with a coating, splintering as a result of snow removal operations, right? So if you have any damage, it's going to occur to the coating, which can be reapplied, as opposed to damaging the actual bridge decking, timber decking, which would actually have to be, replaced.
But that does mean more maintenance of that polymer, and I don't know what the lifespan of these kinds of polymers on wood in a nautical environment would be. Can you give us any guidance there?
It's really going to vary based on the intensity of the use. The fact that we have winters here, snow removal, it's certainly not going to last the same as it does, in southern climates. So,
other thoughts from the committee?
Do you believe that the lifespan of the wood is extended by putting a coating on it, or is it better to be sealed and to be allowed to breathe?
The coating would likely extend the life of the decking itself, but the whole bridge inherently on its own is designed to last a minimum of 20 years, and it's actually well beyond that, but that's typically the warranty period. A 20-year warranty as a minimum is a reasonable request.
Okay.
Would ice melt affect?
That is a good question. I'm not sure if, there are a number of different products. One of the big considerations, we had to go to the Conservation Commission here. So obviously the use of any ice melt product over the water in particular would have to be considered first. And secondary then would be, any potential impact to the bridge after that.
Public concerns or questions? Jim?
Curious.
Again?
I'm just thinking about snow removal manually, with one of those sort of plow-like shovels, and those ribs along the side there would block that. I mean, if it was clear at the edge that you could just push the snow off, you wouldn't need a snow blower or a plow.
Now you're into the railing issue, which will be next. The answer is that, as we all know, from shoveling driveways and even back walks that got to be 8 and 9 feet high, there's a problem when there's nowhere to put the snow.
That's why I think shoving it all under the
Well,
rail.
the conservation wants the snow to be pushed into the ocean right now.
That's right.
That's salt.
We can put our snow in there.
Mark, do you want to add anything on this?
Hi, Mark Mazzarelli here. I would just mention to Eric that you could go with a natural finish, assuming you go with natural timbers, and then if you decide that it is slippery, you can apply something later too. So you have that option available.
Because
but that's not funded, though.
This is a coated. No, I understand. But this is a coating that is brushed on or rolled on.
I think if it was in gray, I think aesthetically it would be acceptable, seeing that the color, everybody seems to be in accord with the overall natural weathering look of the environment, because you have to take into account the natural wood that pre-exists at Town Pier as well. So I mean, you have something that matches up. So you want it to be harmonious in that regard. So yes, so that's my take on color.
Very important, because I think there's a tendency, on the committee to favor natural, nautical. If that's the case, the key point that you made is that we can put it on later.
You could, but it's not funded.
No, I get it, but I didn't know whether, in many cases, once you've sealed a wood, it is hard to apply something else. But in this case, if you're saying it's the same as the old-fashioned, when the days of Bill and I remember wooden boats, when your dad thought he had a slippery deck, he put the deck paint with the traction on it.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Fine. Thank you.
I don't think it's unattractive. I mean, it could go on each board. It's just a process to, But it's a 12-foot wide bridge.
What I expect will be the two more.
Can I ask one quick question, Mr. Bill? How expensive is this as a material? I assume you can reapply it, because we did talk about that. Is this something like the DPW could have, 5 gallons of this material, and what does it cost? Is it what is it based? Are you saying it's a polymer? Is it a mix of things? I mean, there's a lot of different products now we're putting on decks. I don't know if they work, if they're as broad for commercial as they are for residential.
Yeah, I mean, the specifics besides the textured polymer, what I can say is that, the trustees, this is going back, 4 or 5 years now, so when they were considering this, but they priced this option, declined it as an alternate, and I believe the price for World's End for this textured polymer was, I want to say $16,000 for the whole surface there.
Just the road surface, not the
Correct.
That's high.
And what, and just as for reference, size-wise, that's a bigger bridge, but roughly, what are we talking area-wise?
Yeah, it's wider, but short. The span is shorter. So I would say probably 2/3 of the area of.
Then an option then is to give a natural look, and we'd have 2 options. We have one that later, unfunded, we could have it, quite frankly, painted, stained, whatever you want to call it, to increase the traction and the durability. And the second option is within the bid, just provide for natural with an add alternate for a polymer coating. And if the price comes in at 8,000 and we have that room in the budget.
I believe, I don't want to, the cost estimates that I'm throwing out there, things change over time, right? So, exactly. It's certainly possible that this could be funded with the money available, so.
Please come to the mic if you would and identify yourself.
My sister was in the question. My name is Nancy Hardy. I'm a new resident and a neighbor. If you could go to the slide that has the whole decking, my question is very simple. I'm assuming the decking is all going to be the same for landing and the wheelchair accessibility and the bridge. The decking that we're talking is all the same
material? Eric?
Is this all the same decking?
When we prepared this layout,
If you coat, are you coating all of it, or are you just coating the bridge?
that's a very excellent question, and that's yes, defer to the committee on that. I mean, right? So there isn't.
Just the bridge, right? Isn't that the primary concern, is the slip resistance on the bridge?
Well,
visually,
I guess if you went with the polymer, it's going to look very different from the deck. And I think the vision originally here is that the material, the surface decking material, is reasonably consistent right when you start up the ramp and up onto the deck behind Red Eye Roasters and then across the bridge itself.
So back to his point about the composite and your concern about running, if you did your pricing that you were talking about doing, if you composite price that and then price that separate, if they're going to look separate anyway, you could do your cost twofold.
Worth considering.
Just a thought.
Certainly worth considering.
How
yes.
many alternates are we allowed to ask?
Coating is a consideration. I actually have some experience in the business. It's a polyurethane. It's $50 a gallon approximately for a higher end coating. And when you go to apply it, if you've got gaps in your plank, it's going to be dripping into the harbor. So for someone to say $16,000, they're probably putting tarps underneath and trying to protect that. So. They do usually last, 5 years warranty for parking garages and things, and can be reapplied. You can also use an epoxy, but not all the epoxies are UV stable, so those are going to cost even more. So it's just sort of my input. But if we want to ask for those, alternate costs, I'm not objective to it.
And these are excellent questions. We thank the member of the audience for sharing them with us. I think the question needs to be addressed tonight, unfortunately, because of the timing that you've laid out and the other committees that are expecting this bridge to be up and running in the summer. So I believe, my thought, far be it for me to contradict Mark, but I think it's sort of an all-or-nothing endeavor. And I think the consensus is leaning towards natural look first with the appropriate coatings and surface, but with UV and everything else to protect the wood and from splintering, as Brian correctly points out, but taking both with Ed, who apparently is in the business, Ed Morris, and Mark Mazzarelli have said, considering the possibility that somewhere down the road we're not going to get the wearability that we were looking for or something, and we're going to, or protection from the snow shoveling, and we're probably going to have it go. But my vision would be, spurned by the member of the audience who spoke up, all or nothing. I mean, I think all together, I really believe the consistency of the look is very important, and I think starting off with a more natural look and adding the coating as needed later, whether it's by add alternate or whether it's by separate appropriation, it can't be more than $15,000 compared to what we've spent on the bridge so far, the town spent on the bridge. It's not a lot of money to get it done professionally from end to end, and including the deck and the wheelchair ramp, which would have as many concerns with slipping as the bridge itself.
So, Eric, I think you've got some guidance. Let's go on to, I want to...
Question, along to Ed's point. Out of curiosity, for the World's End Bridge, how many add alternates were in that? you know?
2 initially, and then there was some other work that unrelated to the bridge. There was site work there that occurred that the other adults were related to the site work.
I mean, you don't think it's that big a deal to a contractor to bid alternates, do you? I mean, obviously they have to look at different material, but no.
You know, we'd have to just, you know, in terms of how many and
Yeah.
traditionally, when you're setting up the alternates, you want to have the item that is most important to be built at the top of that list, because generally what happens is that depending on the price, the base bid, and the funding available, how that comes in, you know, typically if the funding is available, those alternates are going to get applied in the order that they're listed. So you kind of have to just consider that.
Eric had explained to me earlier that, you know, this does become a prioritization, and in part it's because we're trying to make this fit within a budget that the town has given us and expanded once already. So I think it's important that we get on to the other issues. For example, lighting might be one of those where you say, well, what's more important to us, to have some lighting or to have the potential for a bridge coating, which we might think we'd add later anyway. So I think let's talk through the other two. The next is probably the most interesting in my mind anyway, because I think it deals with the character and feel of the bridge. And this is the railing style. So we've heard some interesting observations. I'm going to lead Eric with just 2 questions because I think they run to both the truss style and the horizontal, which you're not recommending in part because of this safety concern. As I said, I looked at the World's End Bridge today. It was interesting to me because you really don't see the wire mesh. For the members of the committee, this is the equivalent. This is not chicken wire. This is high-end, heavy-grade steel coated. I analogize to lobster traps these days are made out of this material. It's a very heavy, thick stuff. It was interesting to me that in that instance they had the mesh outside the horizontal trusses. And my question to you, Eric, is would it alter your concern about avoiding a ladder, a climbing, if the mesh were on the inside, given that you really don't see it one way or the other? So because I think it's going to impact both our thought about something like this, which I initially found, frankly, quite attractive and very simple and consistent with kind of the vision that I had, maybe. But it's also somewhat true of the truss style, because there I think they had to use mesh as well because the holes were too big to accommodate the state code. So could you respond to whether the wire inside would alleviate your concern about providing kids with a ladder?
It would certainly reduce the potential for that. I would just question perhaps older kids, young adults, still having the means, if they were to get up onto the railing, by having the horizontal style, that if they were able to get up on top and then go over the outside, it provides a way for them to also have like some sort of a ledge to perhaps stand on or whatnot. Again, I'm just where if you have a more vertical style, it would reduce the potential for that. Again, I'm just...
Is this almost a question that I mean, the Sagamore Bridge has a concern about suicide victims, right? And so they have these very tall, and I know some buildings, New York City, you know, they actually have, you know, almost spikes so that you can't kind of crawl over. I know the concern, and I can picture, frankly, I was a teenager in this town once, you know, the possibility of, at high tide, you know, jumping into the town creek will be one of these attractive nuisances, and I think that's something we have to face up to. So I thank you for raising it to us, but we really need to kind of consider the alternatives here. Other thinking on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Bill that my original vision was kind of a sandwich boardwalk, for those of you that have seen it, or some down in Allen's Way, down in Howich, or any of the traditional boardwalk bridges, this look. But when you gave the presentation, I hadn't thought about the state building code with a 4-inch separation. And when you did, if you could go back to one of the other timber looks, either this one or the one without the handrail. Yeah, I don't like the handrail, the metal handrail, but that look there is what you more or less complies with the state look. That in a nautical type gray stain would be, in my opinion, nautical. The one on the right gets, I don't like metal. I think it gets a little busy with the one on the right. I believe anything wiggly doesn't go, but I do believe that complies with, I hadn't liked that previously when you presented it, but I didn't know that it wouldn't, that was compliant with state building code. Also, to Brian Neese's concern about children and the heat on their feet and the splinters, oh boy, what an attractive climbing. I don't think you can stop teenagers from climbing it, whether you have rails in any direction. But on the other hand, with the children, the ages that Brian was concerned about, the little guys, and with all due respect to the chairman and his up-close observations of the mesh, which I would take his word that is very invisible, I would like to avoid a mesh-like thing. As much as this wasn't my first choice until you told me it was state building code, I think it takes care of the little guys climbing, and I think the big guys will have to turn them over to Ken Corset and the police and the signage and the other things to prevent the jumping. But I think this is darn close, whether people put their coffee cups on and they occasionally fall in the water or not. I think it's good for leaning, good for putting your coffee cup there, good for lingering on the bridge, which I think is the vision that Alan Peralt, who more or less was instrumental in starting this whole thing umpteen years ago. A focal point, I think this is along the lines. I did originally share the vision of Chairman Reardon that it was going to be a more, robust thing rather than these smaller slats, but understanding the building department reasons, I've changed my thinking a little bit.
Other observations or thoughts?
Hey, Bill. I'm not as averse to the metal ones in some ways, if they're simple. I agree with the squiggly ones not. The other thing, let's remember, this is going to land like 2/3 of the way out in Whitney Wharf, which has like a metal system. So would it be that crazy to say that the system in between the post would be somewhat similar, and you're going into a similar material? We have to make sure it's galvanized, because that was a mistake that was done when they did Whitney Wharf, but they've replaced that at not a great expense. And I'd also think it'd be possible to have a couple extra sections or something like that is maybe a prerequisite if you're doing it, so it could be kind of universal. If the spacing was such, I'm assuming it will be anyway, that it may not be as hard to apply, and you might actually have 1 or 2 extra sections, heaven forbid something happens to one. That's just a thought.
Well, a related thought, and Mark, I'd actually look to you for this. I mean, I had, it's one thing to look at World's End where you got woods on one side and woods on the other side and a lovely pastoral setting. Alan's right. We're going to a wharf where the visual on the rail is vertical. And whether it's, Alan, whether it's metal carrying across, for me, the notion of a wooden bridge with wooden rails is something that, but I think visually the vertical, to have horizontal then meeting vertical at the wharf probably might be distracting.
I don't think everybody's going to have a different take on this. My take on it is, you remember on the town pier side, you don't have the metal handrails, so correct. It is still an imbalance, no matter how you look at it. My personal, if we go to those slides, those schematics that I prepared, those really quick sketches, maybe a couple more down. Well, maybe go back to the precedents there, just to kind of rule it out. I mean, I think when you look at the sketches that I prepared, what I was trying to put across with these images and the sketches that you're going to see was, is there a way to simply embellish the bridge and make it something more than a pedestrian experience, if you will, because this is going to have a very high town visibility. These bridges that are shown in this precedent, the two of them, obviously we know the one in Boston, the other one's in Chicago, and I actually authored that design. That's 20 years ago. That's at the Lincoln Park Zoo. And obviously it's a different environment, but you have a timber deck with metal handrails. Now, I'm not suggesting that we go with all metal handrails, but I did think that having less wooden uprights, maybe just isolating the wooden uprights to vertical posts, and then having metal mesh or integrated steel would be the most attractive. Now, that's in a perfect world. Right, that's a perfect world scenario. Because then in that scenario, you would have the wooden tie into Town Pier and consistent with the timber bridge approach. And then you would also have the consistency tying back into Whitney Wharf and the verticality of the pickets there. And then maybe even hoops or what have you. Listening to the discussion tonight, I've come up with a slightly different thought process, whereas, and I haven't even shared it with Eric yet, sorry, wondering if the mesh might be appropriate, if there's a way that we could make that palatable for all, because with the mesh you're going to realize some significant savings, I'm guessing, Eric, over vertical steel pickets, which might have a tendency to require a lot of upkeep over the years. I mean, you're going to need to paint it more, bottom line is, and I don't think you're going to be able to get away with the tube steel that the Whitney Wharf park surround has. I don't think that's an appropriate selection. I don't think it's strong enough. So if you go with solid bar stock, I think we've just maybe gone over budget, maybe, to do it right. Maybe not. Again, I don't want to get into another ad alternate scenario, but what I'm trying to kind of home in on, or whatever the correct expression is could we consider the timber with maybe some outrigging or some crossings or some of those diagonals for decorative appeal, thinking that this might be lit and it's going to be highly visible, and then maybe use the mesh for the code requirement without having the busyness of the wooden verticals, which I think, this is just a personal opinion, I think looks a little too, or should I say, less harbor-like. I think it looks more golf course-like. Now, that's no prejudice. It's just.
Eric, can you go back to the bridge color one? It shows the bridge without the handrail with the vertical slats. It says bridge color at the top. It's quite a ways back, unfortunately. No, it was.
That one,
yeah,
right?
that one. So that rail on the right is what I call, in the nautical gray, if we can get it, is what I call the boring conservative alternative, okay? It picks up the consistency with the vertical slats on the Whitney Wharf Bridge. It doesn't get you into the cost of the maintenance of the metal. But you lose what I'm going to call the vision thing. Had you come today prepared with a little more pizzazz or a little more vision besides what you've shown us, which I can't quite get my head around. I mean, some of them look inland type things. You've said yourself it's an inland Chicago park. This may, in a sense, remind me of a golf course bridge, and I would not have been for it, but for the idea that they have to be 4 inches apart to make state building code. I might be convinced to go with a look. I think the World's End Bridge, quite frankly, is too rough looking. I think it'd have to be a more refined look for pedestrian bridge, but something more natural that Bill originally favored, and use the mesh if the mesh is in fact indistinguishable. But before you could sell us on some concept of alternate loops or, something, I would have to see it. And unfortunately, with the bidding schedule in April that Eric laid out, I just think we have to come to some conclusions today.
Let me ask you, are you talking along the lines of something like this?
I think realistic, yeah, I think so, and I think that's a good.
Do you want to bring that one
That's a
up
good image.
on the screen?
I think realistically, at the end of the day, that's
Last one,
probably,
back one. Oh,
that's probably what,
that one on the lower left.
Right or the left?
Lower left.
Okay.
Because that's the mesh you were talking about, correct?
Correct.
Or some version of that.
something like that with the truss in some sort of decorative manner. Maybe it's not as repetitive as that, or maybe we can, well, no, it could still be that. I think there's one of my schematics, I had it crossed. You could do, I was just going to do some quick sketches here.
I would point out that the other advantage of something like this, and World's End did it as well, is that those posts each have a cap on them. Yeah. That's a weather prevention, so that the moisture doesn't go down into the grain of the wood. But it's also, I don't know what the material is down there, whether it's metal or a very hard plastic. But it's a sort of simple appearance-wise. It's a very stately look.
What about an up and down pattern where you went up, but instead of having another one, creating another N, you went back down? Would an up, oh, that's what you came up with, okay,
yes.
good. Great minds think alike. The other advantage to...
I don't know. Again, this all has to be vetted through engineering, but that would be...
Certainly feasible. It also gives you the ability, when we were at the planning board, they asked me questions about lighting, and I had suggested some of the lighting might be built into the posts. Having seen the narrow slats that we were, forced with the state building code, I realized that type of lighting set in the post wouldn't work. But if you expand the post to this size, you have the added ability, in addition to some of those attractive pole lights, that if you wanted to do that traditional dock lighting where you have the lights built in, the very downlit type thing, you could get that. Indirect lighting.
Indirect inside the, let me see if I can diagram that, sorry.
Let's stop there for a moment, because I think we're...
Oh, yeah, we're jumping ahead.
Perilously close
Right.
to consensus on... I think what you're saying is if I won't go up there.
So modified
if
version.
If the left-hand member that's diagonally across instead was yes, I can see that. Those at home
With the
cannot.
mesh on the inside.
Yes, to prevent
Right?
the...
You don't want anybody climbing those truss members.
Yep.
Right?
If I were a kid, I would just climb it from the outside.
Right.
I would start at
I would take my shoes
go
off
on
and
the
get my
outside
toes in there.
backwards, and then do a nice forward
remember, that's
somersault.
fenced.
I'd be remiss if I didn't notice that the former chairman of the Harbor Committee who originated this bridge concept seems to be having some difficulty with this.
I really want to mention is obviously our late colleague Dave Fenton. And Dave was one of the ones who insisted when we went to get town meeting funding, Alan, you need a vision of this thing. And he was the one that said we should reach out to Mark Mazzarelli and do the rendering. The one that was done was actually for town meeting 3 years ago. And he also said, you can have one chance to get this right visually, and everyone's going to be a critic. In all due respect to Mark's thing in this, I personally don't like the York upper right-hand one. I don't know why. What about the simple timber picket that you show in your railings?
We're talking about the lower left.
I don't like either one, personally.
Okay.
I think...
Even if it's changed so that it...
you got to really make it pretty interesting to me, because I think this is going to be very visual from both the water. On your railing style, you showed the simple timber picket, and there was one that wasn't quite as... That one on the right. That, to me, is not as boring as the one Paul was pointing out, and yet you get a little character of, by having, it's probably going to be a tad bit more expensive, I don't disagree with that, but I mean, I think it's wood, it's vertical. The aesthetics of this is going to be very noticeable from walking on opposite side 3A and from the water. I'm just not as crazy about this look. Or
when I appeared before CPC, another mission that Bill launched me on as vice chair, I got at least a few pointed questions from one or more members who pointed out your cover sheet one that did have
The rendering.
The original rendering. Can't come up with the most basic word. And said, listen, this is what town meeting voted on, this is what everybody's been shown for the last umpteen years, and they is the funding source. And she took offense that, you mean to tell us, and Eric will confirm this, and Roger would if he was here, that, I had to say that was a rendering and that was a concept, and she wanted to know whether we were switching the design. So to the degree that the town has seen, even though they were just renderings,
those vertical slats. And knowing what our beach committee friend, our former chairman Peralta, has said about the picking up the vertical, I could go with either of these, some version of either of these, or I guess I could be convinced. It might come down to a vote. I think the Harbor Committee is going to make a decision tonight, though.
I'd have to say, Alan, I think to mirror what Mark has just said, this is going to be, sort of personal vision. And Alan, you've expressed an interest in, a preference for the one on the right. I find that personally busy and more sort of fussy than
I'm just saying something vertical. I think that's a little less boring than the first one Paul had. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think if you had something vertical wood that could be treated the same way you're going to treat the thing, with a spray-on type of thing or a roll-on type of decking.
I have a lot of verticality. I'm going to put my hard sell on here.
Yeah.
You're going to have the verticality of the piers themselves, the support timbers below, and then you're going to have the rhythm of the posts themselves.
Okay.
Now,
did you have a rendering that you wanted us to see? You were trying to get Eric.
Well, I think it's probably it's sort of it's towards the end. It doesn't quite sync up with what we're talking about, but that's the hoop with the metal rail, so that's out. So this is a modified. This is the cross one. But if you
Isn't that really what Alan calls the boring one? My boring choice with some extras.
So if you were to now amend that to this thinking here, on the top.
Instead of a cross, it's up one and then down on the other, and then up.
It's a combination of truss and picket, essentially.
Yes. Well, and even I don't know if you can see this, but on the bottom, I don't know if we could even have some outriggers at each post in the sectional view. That's an awfully nice treatment, and I think they have it at the Old North Bridge, I believe, in Concord. Yeah.
Where you have where the posts are, you have a longer decking board. Is that correct?
Right. So that's a side view. So you would have
I know what
you like here.
Yeah.
Something like that. So this is a sectional view. So that's your post, right? This is your walking surface.
Yeah.
This is the outside, and you'd have the deck.
Every 10 feet or so?
Every post, you'd have something like that. That's very...
I know what you mean.
Do those have any function, Mark,
No.
from an engineering standpoint? So they're just decoration. It's ornamentation.
No,
Mark, you should get back to your mic there. We saw it, but
I would just say I think it should be something very simple that looks like it's been there for 50 or 100 years with very little ornamentation that's just appropriate to a historic New England harbor. And let's not overthink it.
I'm sensing, Alan, with apologies, that there's more leaning toward that simpler appearance than the more...
I'd just like to see a visual of it, I guess. If we're going to do it, I think it's worthwhile I think, Mark, there's hopefully someone in the budget that we see one or two of these alternates in a sketch that could still, we could still look at.
I think the goal was to try to get some level of consensus so that we could develop it one step beyond where we are today, and then run that back through everyone, and hopefully get pretty close to.
Let's do that. I think we should go on. It's 10 minutes of 9. I don't want this meeting to go over long. We have a few other matters, but we need to get to lighting. Yep. And one of our speakers wanted to come up, and again, please come to the mic, Nancy. And this, I'm assuming, is on the
Both.
Okay.
I'm a dual. Okay, once again, I'm Nancy Hurdy, and I wrote this one down. I've never lived, I'm going to preface this, I've never lived in a harbor community before, so the wind today is like blowing me away. So my thought is, and it's a twofold question, if you had the drawing with the lights and the railings in a drawing up there, I think,
Yep.
B at the bottom.
Yep.
So would the committee consider having hanging flower baskets or the American flag pole fixed But with the wind blowing like it was today, that's like, no, it's not going to happen. But could that be attached to either the railing or if you have lights in the pole, in the bridge, could you do that? Now, a problem with the hanging baskets is you have to have some charity that's willing to pay to donate, or citizens that are willing to pay $25 to donate the hanging baskets. And then another problem is who's going to water them? Is there somebody in town that's going to water them? Okay, see, I did that in the town that I was living in.
My wife's on it. Hi, Nancy.
Okay, hi. Call me. I want to be on with you. So those are things that could the American flag, because I see this bridge when I read about it in the newspaper as very exciting. Bridal wedding proposals, and this is part of the community. And prom date, will you go to prom with me? All kinds of things are going to happen on this bridge. Some of it we don't want to know about. A lot of it we're going to see in the newspaper. But this is very exciting what y'all are doing, and I'm excited to be here listening. So thank you very much for
Nancy
listening to my question.
is a new neighbor for me. I met her about a month ago, and she's coming from a Connecticut community that cared about its waterfront as well. I will say, Nancy, that this is, you're not even able to get to the park where there are 4 standing large flagpoles that are part of Whitney Wharf Park. But you raise a good point, and I think we should get into that in the context of the lighting discussion, because we're going to be talking about whether it's elevated lighting or recessed and part of the bridge. So let's go on into that 4th component. And Eric here, I think, or Mark, this is probably actually more you'd said, the pole fixture style, the height, sconces, the location on the bridge.
Again, in a perfect world, we would make it like the public garden bridge, just, over the top, beautiful. With, I think in the plan diagram that's in your packet, and we looked at in one of the slides, I indicated on the plan some mid-bridge light fixtures. The thinking there would be they would be slightly lower than your typical street fixture. They would have a more human scale to them. They would be lower wattage fixtures. They would be as much decorative as they would be useful for wayfinding. So it's a different type of light altogether. And then the other bridge diagram I illustrated that had the metal handrails actually had, I thought, an interesting alternate idea where we incorporated nautical type lighting on a lower level type, again, wayfinding, more decorative. Remember, I'm coming at this from how can I make this bridge more special than just a crossing than we illustrated. So, you can take what I'm saying, one ear out the other type thing, or you can embrace it. But I think all of these ideas could work. So you can see there's intervals where you would have the 2 lights mid bridge. You'd have them at the ends. I think that would be quite special. Obviously, this would need to be developed a little further, but using that nautical style fixture, if it could be applied here, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it would be a one of a kind thing.
I know that you do have here reflected the existing pole and its relative height. There are 8 of those on Whitney Wharf, 4 on each side. One problem, which as we approach lighting is a constant concern, is those are on and off, and we've had maintenance and bulb replacement issues and so forth. But so I'm very conscious of wanting to try to have something that will be as low maintenance and least cost as well. But I know this may be, lighting may be something that does or doesn't fit in this budget, is the other matter for us. But
well, I mean, obviously we all know why lighting is great. I mean, it gives you wayfinding. It could illuminate the bridge, make it take a simple crossing and make it a civic centerpiece of the harbor front. And also, it provides a level of safety and comfort for users. On understanding that budgets are concerned, lighting is a huge expense. Each fixture, each one of those Whitney Wharf fixtures to buy and install is, you're looking at close to $8,000 maybe, right, to put in. Now, one thing, I just want to get this out here just to remind everyone, when we did Whitney Wharf Park, the light selection was made very easy to us because the town said, there's only one selection, and that's it. And one of the lights that we illustrated in this packet is that light, and I think we pointed it out during Eric's, that one right there.
It's only a single.
Correct.
It's not a double.
Correct. So that's what Hingham now currently maintains. But
this is a bridge between two. Alan had pointed out that perhaps, or this was this afternoon, he'd taken a picture of the ones on Whitney Wharf so that we could all remind us, but you've given us that.
Right.
Whether, for example, you might put one pole like that over on the 3A Otis Street side and then have different fixtures going across the bridge itself.
Right. So the plan that I illustrated going back actually shows one new light pole over by the roasters. So if you look at the town on the left illustration, lower left. Yeah. Now yeah, right. Now I'm not sure that's the greatest location for it, but that one made a lot of sense because, well, let's put it this way. There is no really ideal spot for it because I don't want to put it on the deck per se because that type of fixture needs a footing. So I was looking for a spot where I could actually get it into the ground, so that at that part of town pier we could actually excavate and pour concrete, or insert.
Right in the easement area at that point.
It's right in the easement area.
So
Sure, that's allowed within the easement. I think if you go back to the other picture, if you would, the other rendering that you showed us with the side view of the bridge, with all the lights, it's just the next slide, I think. That one. I believe, to use Olympic terminology, I think you nailed it with this. I like it. I think it's up there in the 9 or 10 range of 10. Here's what I think to visualize. First of all, it shows us, gets us back to the railings. Second of all, because my idea of the recessed lighting in the larger typical, piles of a typical dock isn't going to comply. I like the idea that you've continued these thinner but maybe slightly larger poles, larger than the slats but much smaller than the piles I had originally envisioned. You've continued them with a more delicate nautical version of what is the Hingham standard lighting. So if those are done, especially if they're done in some type of brass or a metal that's got some type of a nautical tint, and coming in from the harbor side, not from the mill dam side, if you could use a red and red, both for nautical reasons, look, and for safety reasons, if you could put a red and a green light on the appropriate sides of the wider opening, I think that would give it a more nautical flair and keep Ken Corson happy. But I do think this idea of 8 of these, if those larger ones are $8,000, these can't be much more than a few thousand each. And the other question I had, because you've showed this, there was what Mr. Peralt called the boring alternative that still seemed to be kind of, similar to what you've shown here. What was your vision? I know this was a sketch for lighting, but what was your vision of those oval-shaped things? Were those metal? Were those wood? What were they?
Those are just hoops. Those are the metal hoops that were to embellish the bridge and make it look like a proper footbridge.
Can we combine the slightly boring but durable look that I favored with these metal hoops?
Yeah, with the trussing. Yeah. Well, I think that's.
So it looked just like this, in other words.
Well.
I'm sensing, Mark and Eric, that as to this element, we're going to need a few more drawings, a couple of different cuts at this. The hoops are very similar to this shape, which you showed us earlier. Yes, trussing. Exactly. Yeah. So we may want to see that. The other observation I would make as to lighting is, if you have the large light on the Whitney Wharf side, which happens to line up pretty close to where the end of the bridge is, and you have a comparable light on the other side, it may be that you may not need all 8. It may be that you could get away with the 4 in the center.
Okay. You might, and that's valid.
So that picture there has
or with matching on the other side?
Yeah, but
Yes.
remember, the lights
Okay.
are, I would actually look to help find but if we could, maybe actually use a real nautical light. I mean, right out of a Chandler's supply book. See if we could retrofit one of those. I mean, because just I don't know. Hopefully, I'm not running away with this, Eric. But think about the materials. I mean, you've got big rugged timbers. It's okay if you have a galvanized conduit that comes up the side and it sits on a galvan. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be delicate looking, I suppose. It could have that rugged nautical look. I mean, it could just have a very simple base with a pole, little pole extension. If you go back to the lighting precedents, I pulled one out right there. See the middle lower one? Something like that is what I'm imagining. And we could change the lens we could get, but it's really for minimal wayfinding and decoration. I mean, we between the two pole lights. So we're going to buy one new pole light. I think we're all in agreement there, right? And we'll find a spot that's just on the edge of the easement or workable solution, and then maybe some lights on the bridge, because what my point was, you've got over 120 feet between lights. That's not enough coverage. You're going to need some intermediate lighting. Yeah.
You spoke before about brightness, and once you have a sense of where you want it, then you work with how many lumens and so forth.
Yeah.
Yes, it's all dependent. You have to take the fixture height, the specific fixture. There's different color. There's different color of just even bulb styles that are within there in terms of the color of the light that they give off. All those are combined to create. It would be a plan that would be generated to see where the lighting intensities fall on the deck surface of the bridge. So
we stick some spikes on them or something so that they don't become single.
Yeah, the bird little things. Yeah.
Maybe electrify them.
Do you know
Is there any place we could put the flower pots, the lady hanging flower pots on these light poles?
Well, I don't know about on the light poles, but you could look at ways to retrofit them to go over the sides of the railings. I mean, those you could have just a clip come over.
For Mrs. Hurdy's benefit and for others who may be aware, I know the person who did the Whitney Wharf Bridge, and the absolute nemesis for them was once the plantings were in, watering and getting care and maintenance. We're all hoping, this Harbor Development Committee is hoping that with this bridge, Whitney Wharf feels like the rest of the harbor, and we begin to think and work toward, and whether this is with DPW or some of Ken Corson's crew, that we can do better on the maintenance front, so that your vision, I love the notion of hanging flower pots in the summer, but you absolutely have to cover that front, and invariably we have to be thinking, and I know there is water on Whitney Wharf, but it in terms of actually who's going to do it is an issue. So
It's not going to be integral design. It's something that
no, it's something that could be added. So I'm sensing at a little after 9 that we're beginning to come down to the end here. Jim, did you have a final comment? Please.
I'm just assuming that all the lights would shine down only. The spherical lights would shine upwards too, but I think the intent of dark skies is to have lights shine only down.
Well, we're not talking about high wattage lights here. We're talking about low intensity.
Like your red one, the shining on the walkway, not lighting up everything.
Well, well, I don't think we've finished really the whole discussion yet. But
okay.
So your concern would be
the incremental lighting of the sky.
So night skylight.
Jim, I have to emphasize, though, if you go down there now at night, there are some very large floodlights that go out over the town dock, which are far more obtrusive than anything that would be added here.
I agree. We don't want to, I mean, it's a valid point, obviously. These aren't, the lights that I'm thinking about, the nautical light idea, doesn't have cutoffs. But it would have, but that one has a cap, so it wouldn't necessarily shine directly up.
Am I the only one who's that fond of that light?
Well, it's not that style.
That's a bad example.
We're gonna pick.
Looks industrial.
I mean, I would look to the committee to help maybe guide us on a.
What you had on the hand rendering looked better than that.
Yeah, well, apologies for that. I mean, we really.
I have a nautical store in Maine that I can.
Yeah,
that would be great. I mean, it would be.
Designate Bill as a one-man
Well,
subcommittee.
no, the last thing I wanted to just throw in there. I know we're very late here, but. And I don't necessarily advocate it, but it is an option that you need to know is the sconces on the insides of the posts. And, they're not going to be any lower maintenance. They're going to be slightly less cost, but you're going to need more of them. They're going to have inherent cutoffs because of the way they're mounted. We could have them outwardly mounted for greater illumination, so that would be, could I do another quick sketch?
You're talking sconces down on the rails
posts,
itself.
on the posts
Yes.
for the handrails.
Yeah.
So this is the handrail, this is the post, and I guess the mesh maybe. So we could have them on the outside of the posts, right? And this is, I'm in the walkway now.
Yes.
The water's over there. We could have them there, or we could have them there as well.
I envision that's fine.
But do you?
But remember, that would be cutting off light. You wouldn't be getting the maximum.
Do you
amount of
perceive
light.
that's an alternate to the poles above, or
It's an alternate.
added to?
It's an alternate. It could be added. It could be either or.
Well, if you only do them in the middle and you decided you didn't have enough. If you did them only in the middle to save money, and you decided you had a dark spot going toward the end of the bridge, you could do these small built-in subtle lights. You see them on every marina, really.
It's an alternate, right?
Yeah.
And you do the four nauticals here, right? And you do the sconces on either side, inside there, gets you on the bridge.
Now repeat what you said at the
That way
microphone.
it's safe.
For the
Ed,
repeat what you just said at the
over-
microphone.
yeah.
Take it with you. Yeah, just like Sammy Davis Jr. There you go. Move around.
So the.
Yeah, just say what you said.
Did I disconnect?
Just disconnected.
Take the one right there. Just
No.
move-
Take
move
it.
that right there.
Mark, take that one.
No, I was in a rock.
All the way down.
You're in a rock and roll band,
You
yeah.
know when it's
How's
all
it
the
doing?
way in.
Okay, so what we just discussed was, thank you. The idea of nautical lights towards the center, maybe sconces on the outsides as you approach the bridge for safety and wayfinding.
Now, you're saying a sconce. What do you mean by a sconce? I mean, I think of like nautical, ones that almost have like a little cage on the outside of them. That's what we mean,
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. like
That's
that.
kind of what I drew.
Right.
Okay, good.
That would be on the post.
Got it,
It
okay.
looks like a catcher's face mask.
Correct, good. Good analogy, yeah. But that, I think, is nautical, I think, yeah. Okay.
So hybrid.
Huh. That's not a good idea, so, go ahead, yeah.
Going hybrid, again, across.
We're adding. But yeah, I think you're saying it could be either or.
But remember, lighting, I don't know where lighting is on the baseline budget for this project, but, I mean, given the amount of discussion we've dedicated to tonight, I mean, it's an important element, and it's a nice finishing touch. So, to whatever extent we could make it work, we should try, you know.
I think the committee has a consensus that four attractive nautical lights emanating from the center of the bridge, two on each side, and as many sconce lights as you determine through your calculations for the amount of light you're going to get from the big pole lights on the mainland each side, and those four smaller lights in the middle of the bridge. That seems to be in your RFP. Now, my general question is, Eric had told us at a prior presentation quite a long time ago that a lot of the bidders on this will be companies that almost are going to have these components almost pre-manufactured back at the factory, and they're going to drop them into place. It's not per se a stick-built bridge, if you will. To that degree, do you need a little more flexibility? In other words, Chairman Reardon has pointed out that we don't have a complete consensus on every item. But do you need the flexibility of not having it? Or it's not an RFP, though. It's a bid. So the low bidder is going to get it? Is that how it works?
No. By having an RFP, and the criteria we have to develop based on the feedback tonight and any future discussions is going to guide that
Is it an
process,
RFP or a hard bid that you contemplate?
RFP.
Oh, excellent. Then you may have, contrary to what I said about we have to make final decisions, you may have enough guidance, and that slight variation in what the vision is on some of these things may allow you to get these manufacturers who might otherwise not bid because they made a slightly different slatting material to their rail system, and that was their standard feature, and to do it differently, they would either not bid it or bid it very high. It might give you the ability to build in just a little bit of flexibility.
Those manufacturers that do have those prefabricated CAN systems actually have more options than they've done so many right across the country that there's open to any options. Even though structurally, the key with those systems is that structurally they're developed to be structurally sound from a load rating perspective, but in terms of finishes and features, railing designs, that's all tangential.
How much more guidance do you and Mark need from this committee to develop your construction level, bid level drawings?
I think we're pretty. I'll be honest. We're not going to be, picking every last detail tonight. That was never the intention. I think that we do have enough information to proceed with preparation of the RFP and the criteria that will be used to select a contractor.
I think that's my sense. If we go back over the four things, we talked about color, and we're leaning toward a sort of tinted UV nautical look, light gray to natural. As to surface treatment, initially not, perhaps an alt in terms of a polymer. In terms of rail style, that was probably the one that led to the most discussion. But I think we have a couple of different concepts that I'd like to see, maybe a drawing or two. Mark, what you were pointing out to me worked. I know Alan might not have been there. He was looking for the slightly more, what'll I call it, busy. But that was personal. And then in this,
I don't think busy is
in this lighting, I think there will be that's the question. We'll have to see how much vertical component there is. So I feel as if we've given you a lot of information, and that you're positioned to go and do some more for us. And we're going to talk in a minute about our next meeting as it relates to another matter in town, and that may inform our timing.
I don't believe, I agree with everything you said, Bill, but I do believe that with the bid documents going out in April, that they won't be back here. They really won't. They may have some more subtle things to present to you as chairman, or that you might even circulate, but I believe that because Eric advised me tonight that it's an RFP, not a hard bid, and I do construction law, so I'm more familiar with the hard bid side, but still generally familiar with the RFP. The RFP, I believe, gives you enough flexibility to bridge those existing differences among the members of the committee, including our beach committee friends, that will come in. In other words, we and/or the selectmen or both will have another, in a sense, bite at that apple, but they'll be within the parameters, because they clearly know what we don't like. But within those parameters that you will describe verbally in your RFP, I believe you will get a cross-section of everything that various members found attractive. And therefore, I believe we can leave tonight cutting you guys loose to get your bid drawing, to get your RFP drawings and documents out.
Bill, can I ask one question on the timing of this thing? I think there was an assumption
we're obviously getting, this is not going to be ready for July 4th under any scenario, correct? So I wonder, is there a necessity to put this out to bid in April? And I want to get things decided as well as everyone, because I think we've waited a long time for this. But realistically, when do we want this to be constructed in light of the fact this is going to be behind an existing marina, you know, with their access during the summertime, and a park at its busiest time of the year? Is there an optimum time to actually have the major construction work done?
Let me speak to that, because it's my thinking has been moved along by some conversations I've had with town engineer Roger Fernandez, and to some extent with Eric recently. I think we had initially been working on the assumption that, well, boy, once we get into the boating season, it's really not going to be viable to have hard construction work going on this. Roger said, no, not so fast. I think we probably could do work because, and then I spoke with Eric last week, and I said, well, how would this be done? Is it most of it going to be waterside? And the answer appears to be no. More likely, most of it is going to be from the Whitney Wharf side, which the town totally controls, can close off half of Whitney Wharf if need be. There's going to have to be some sort of a derrick and pile driving of some kind that's going to go on here. So I'm not. Whereas earlier we said, well, if we don't build by June, then we ought to wait till October.
Well,
I'm not sure.
Is Nick Bond on board with that, though? I guess I would wonder about the that marina. Is how disruptive. I mean, there's a whole decade.
Now, there's another component.
There.
I went before CPC when Bill was away. Not that long ago, and there was a very well. They gave us a deadline. It was a threat to pulling the funding back, and they truly, maybe the consensus wasn't, but a couple, at least one member of the committee was adamant about the timing, and they committed, I believe, to getting it done by July 1st. Or thereabouts, in a formal vote on the funding. I believe with the timeline that Eric laid out, which I believe he laid out in part, knowing about that vote, they will give us an extra 30/45, 60 days. But I think if we just say, oh, we're going to wait till after September to start it, I think we could have a problem.
Again, it's just my opinion.
No.
Has anyone talked to Nick Bond? I mean, I just think it's logical. This is his busiest time of the year, and assuming it can be integrated, I don't think CPC is pulling this thing out. If this thing is out to bid in May, myself, I mean, that's just me again. But and I hear what you're saying, Bill, and I know a lot of this work because I know how they actually built the bridge out at World's End, and I know a lot of it's done, from. They minimize it. They do a lot of that work quickly. The deck work behind Three Otis is not going to happen overnight, and you're talking, Red Eye Roasters is extremely busy. The marina's busy, their busiest time of the year.
As the CPC person assigned to this project a couple of years ago, I think we acknowledged you're spending a lot of very intense time and working quite closely and need whatever time more you need. And personally, I wouldn't worry about 4th of July. They're the things to do.
I was not able to attend that meeting, Paul, but if I had to go back to CPC, I was the chair of the CPC when we established the policy that they're referring to.
Right.
And
the whole town has now heard you say you're going back.
I'm happy to speak to the town because I think there was a misunderstanding on the part of that member of the Community Preservation Committee. The intent was to light a fire under those sponsors of projects who put money, got money for the project and then sat on it and were doing nothing. And I can assure any voter listening to this, anyone at home, Jim, or the entire CPC, this project has been actively pursued since last April, if not weekly, and my engineer friend can confirm this. So anyway,
I don't think I've ever seen a job permitted quite this quickly. A marine job, as the chairman pointed out earlier in the meeting, is very difficult to permit. From the point that we went to the CPC, that meeting that Jim was at and that you alluded to, I believe Eric has, with your help, helping him and encouraging him from the background, has moved at warp speed to get this thing permitted. And congratulations to you for that.
So, Alan, I think my result would be let us see if we'll continue to work with Eric and Mark. I'm going to speak about our next meeting, and that might be an opportunity for check-in. That might not be quite, early April, but, so I think we're going to conclude this portion of the meeting. Eric, I don't think we're going to be a real long time I know it looks like 4 more agenda items, but they're all very quick, and one, which is the setting of our next meeting, might bear. So if you could bear with us for a few minutes. So we're going off of the 3rd item on our agenda on to the 4th. The Harbor Task Force, Paula Sordo was named as this committee's representative to that task force. My understanding is that they have not met, but are slated to fairly soon, according to Chairman Lauder from the Selectmen's office.
Right. I did do my online course again, and I did get sworn in, and I reported in duly to the chairman and Ted Alexiadis and others, and they told me that they were really focused on the warrant articles right now, and as soon as they cleared that hurdle, they would organize a meeting among the appointed members of the Harbor Task Force, but there has been no meeting, and therefore nothing to report.
Okay, very quickly, Ken Corson, the harbor master, could not be with us tonight. He continues to have his courses at law school be on Wednesday evenings. I think that ends this semester, so we're hoping to arrange a meeting that he can be with us, particularly as we get into the active part of running the harbor this summer. So I don't have anything from Ken. In terms of other matters, I'll just mention two things. One, the members of the committee are aware that I did draft and submit for the town's annual report. Each committee puts out, as part of the printed annual report that's handed out to us at town meeting, a bit of a summary of what the committee's activities have been over the last year. Alan, I looked back to yours from last year. I'm assuming you did something similar for the bathing beach.
Correct.
And I tried to not have us step on each other's toes, so I think that works. The other thing I want to mention is that I mentioned at the outset that the onset of this potential purchase of Kimball Wharf, the marina, is raising a real dilemma for the town financially. And the selectmen are very conscious of this. The advisory committee is very conscious of this. Selectmen have slated for discussion tomorrow evening. It isn't revisiting the 3 articles, but it's trying to think about creative financial ways to make it all work. The harbor improvement article, that's the bathing beach work and the engineering, $852,000 I think is the total. The $400,000 of engineering funds for Summer Street and the potential acquisition of the town pier, of the marina as a town marina. The total is somewhere in the $4.25 to $4.5 million. It's a great deal of money, and the source for all of that is the general fund. The general fund stands at, and I'm not going to give a number because I'm not close enough to it yet. The issue for the advisory committee is they have a policy, which is that they want the general fund to stand at somewhere. They actually changed their policy this year to stand at somewhere between 16 and 20% of the annual expenditures for the town, disbursements for the town. If all of those articles were approved, we would be below our policy. The policy is a policy. There are exceptions to that policy. The question for the town, and this starts with the selectmen and the advisory committee, but to some extent it impacts us as well, is this a situation with the ability to purchase this wharf, which we had a chance to buy once before? If we had acted, I think it was around 1999, 2000, the wharf was for sale to the town for $610,000. The price today is $2,009,000 something. We were not opportunistic. As Ted Alexiadis said to the advisory committee, if we don't do this now, it may become available to us again at a later time, but we can be sure the price will be higher still. So it's a real question. My only point is, Chairman Lauder spoke to me this afternoon and asked if I would ask for the views of our committee with respect to the purchase of that marina. I didn't get a chance to respond back to her, but my sense is that it would be premature at this meeting for us to do that because we don't yet have the appraisal, the town's appraisal. I understand there are some other alternatives that are being explored in terms of financing that would not impact the general fund. I don't know what those are yet. And I want from the advisory committee and Mary Power, I was on the advisory committee, I chaired the advisory committee. I want to have a much better sense of how much of a request is, quote, the harbor making to the town before we, explore this proposition. There'll be two other opportunities, advisory committee meeting on March 26th to have a public hearing, and advisory committee on April 15th to vote. Selectmen's meeting tomorrow evening, we'll talk about the interweaving of these three articles and their impact on the general fund. So my own belief is that I think it would be premature for me to ask a view of this committee now. I think we need more information. I think the town needs more information before the town is going to be ready to address this. Tom.
So, Selectmen are basically saying the other two articles we spent all that time on, from evaluation and financing and over the last, putting together the warrant article, may be in jeopardy because of the other one being combined, or are those going to stand on its own merits, or?
Tom, that's the question. It's additive in terms of the impact on the general fund, unless there is, as I had understood by phone this afternoon, some exploration of other alternatives for financing that would not be take such a large hit on the general fund.
Who's the point person for the town with respect to the potential purchase? Who has the facts on the numbers, and who has the person?
The town administrator, Ted Alexiadis.
Okay, so he has the numbers as to what it's making now, because you said they're going to inherit the...
Oh, yes. No, the appraisal, as I understand it, I haven't seen the appraisal, but the appraisal was prepared, obviously, by the seller.
Right.
And the value, obviously, is not simply the real estate. It is the value of the going concern of a marina. So that's yet to be received, yet to be vetted. It bears, though, on our next meeting. And the reason I wanted to raise this is the advisory committee is going to meet, as I said, to vote on the 15th. They expect by then that the town's appraisal will be in hand. They hope it will be in hand by the 26th of March when they have their next meeting. I would like to propose that we meet on April 8th, which is a Wednesday. It's about 3 weeks from now, but it would allow a lot more information to be in hand, and I think position us to be in a better position to, how shall I put this, responsibly take a position in terms of whether we think the town should proceed with all of these harbor-related articles, or whether we perceive that there should be a priority among them.
And to Tom's point, Ted Alexiadis even apologized to advisory, saying, look, the negotiations happen when they happen. It's not ideal. But advisory did make a point that there were two of the warrant articles have been vetted fully. And I think, so there clearly is a difference, but timing in real estate is something you can't always control, so.
Yeah, but are we, I guess what I'm going to ask is, are we willing to consider, with the proper information, of course, whether we would take a position that this new proposal trumps the other, or it goes in a higher priority than the others that have been vetted? I mean, is that what we're going to talk about, Bill?
I think the town is going to have to be in the position of saying, can we do all of these, or should there be priorities, and if so, which ones? And my expectation is that the town will in part look to our committee to sort of say, well, if you had to make some choices, what would your choices be? I'm not prepared to have that conversation this evening, and I don't think we should. But we may be asked to.
I think that all the points have been raised that we're going to hone in on the April 8th meeting. I believe my general view is that I am appreciative and respectful of the attention that the current selectmen have paid to the harbor, and we want to keep that good working relationship with them. On the other hand, I'd be remiss if I didn't echo the sentiments of one of our past members, John Thomas, who always said it's very important that we maintain what we've acquired and have held either for many years or more recently with a mobile acquisition. And to the degree that we've spent so much time as a committee and the town has so thoroughly vetted these proposals to build the seawall and to study for $175,000 these very valuable town properties, I would, for one, be very sad to see those go down in any way because of the potential effect of a $2.9 million proposal to buy.
I think everything that could be said has been said on this topic. I look forward to gathering on the 8th when we'll have a lot more information.
I think what I was just mentioning, Ed, I think we'll try to have the trustees, because obviously we have a joint article
Yes,
together anyway,
very
so
much so.
I'll try to have a trustees meeting at the same time. We'll try to maybe do a joint.
I should
make
point out to
most
the
sense.
committee, Alan, like me, has been asked to come to the selectmen's meeting tomorrow to begin to engage in this conversation. We can.
Right.
So, any other general questions from the public? And if not, we're getting very close to a motion to adjourn being in order. I want to, before we adjourn, publicly thank those who came. My new neighbor, John Thomas, representative from Community Preservation, gentleman in the back. I didn't hear from you, so I don't know who you are. But and I do want to thank. I'm sorry.
That's fine with him.
Okay. Thank you. And I again want to thank HCAM, our local television station, for their very public-spirited willingness to come and get this on tape, so that whether it's tonight or on a recurring basis, people can have a better understanding of what we're trying to do on the harbor, where we've come from, where we're going to, and how this bridge project relates to all of that. So,
Bill, one last, where is that available all the time, so somebody wants to come back, the plan, the master plan?
This large-scale foam core board is in the harbor master's office anytime. That's where I got it this afternoon. Some of that is a little dated, but it does. Several members of the advisory committee, literally, when I spoke about this pier or that pier, just didn't know where I was speaking. And that's why I brought it this evening. So again, with thanks, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Long meeting. Appreciate it.
Is April
Make
8th okay?
sure.